Hi, my name is Colin. I'm a doctoral student in clinical psychology, and I work in behavior intervention, helping people, especially teens and families, develop better communication, motivation, and life skills. On this channel, I take real life challenges from career decisions to motivation struggles and break them down using psychology. My goal is not just to teach psychology, but to help you use it to make practical, positive changes in your life. Whether you're trying to leave a toxic job or just understanding why change feels so hard, my mission is to help you understand your mind better and act with more clarity and confidence. So, today we're diving into something you probably felt or thought about, but haven't really had time to unpack. Why do people stay in bad jobs? And what psychological barriers keep us from choosing potentially better alternatives, especially jobs in the public sector? With rising economic uncertainty and growing fears of a recession, this question feels more relevant than ever. People are reevaluating their careers, their finances, and what truly matters in their work life. In this video, I want to explore why we hesitate to leave toxic or unstable work situations, even when safer, more secure options exist, and how psychology can help us understand and overcome that hesitation. So first, let's explore the psychology behind staying in jobs we dislike. One major factor is confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. For example, if you believe that you're stuck in your current job, you'll constantly notice reasons why leaving seems impossible, ignoring evidence that opportunities exist elsewhere. Maybe your friend mentions a government opening, and instead of considering it, you brush it off thinking, that won't work for me, I can't work there. Another powerful psychological force is the sunk cost fallacy. This is the idea that because you've already invested so much time or energy into a job, leaving now would mean those efforts were wasted. For instance, someone might say, I've been here 5 years, I can't just walk away now, even if those 5 years have been miserable. This past investment becomes a mental chain holding them in place. I've seen this before in my life. I used to work at a movie theater. I only worked there for a year when I was in high school. I came back to that same movie theater recently. I've been out of high school for 10 years, and I saw someone who used to be my coworker still working there in the same position. And this isn't to bring judgment onto them, but I felt like just from seeing them and talking with them for a few minutes, I could tell they wanted more out of their life. I could tell they wanted to do something else just from their body language, just from their tone. And I felt like that was such a shame. If you want to go out and do new things in your life, you should. So again, this is the reason I'm making this video. Another reason is loss aversion. Our tendency to fear potential losses more than we value equivalent gains. You might stay in a job that causes daily stress because the idea of losing a consistent paycheck or health insurance feels too risky, even if another job could drastically improve your life over time. So I want to talk more about the types of jobs that people get into. I know a lot of people who mostly work for a private company, and I don't really know that many people who actually work for the government. I only have a few friends who do that, and I think it's worth exploring that more because I think we have a bias against people who work for the government, whether that's state or federal, and I want to see why that is. Also talk more about why there might be some really big benefits to working in the public sector over the private sector. I think there's a lot of historical reasons and psychological reasons. People commonly hold negative stereotypes of government jobs, like it's inefficient and it's filled with lazy people, and I think that's reinforced by availability bias. Think about how many jokes or rants you've heard from the DMV, those stories that stick with us more than the quiet efficiency of your mail being delivered every day without fail. I think a good example is the DMV. We always make fun of the DMV and how inefficient it is and how much it must suck to work there. And I will say this, it doesn't seem like too many people at the DMV seem super stoked to be there, but I think that's just one limited example when we have so many other things that run really well and relatively efficient, like the US Postal Service. American culture emphasizes being individual, entrepreneurial, and the idea that success is self-made. This stems all the way back from our nation's foundings. We're born from rebellion against authoritarian rule and centralized power. Earlier Americans feared big government, and that weariness trickles into how we view public servants. Then I think there was a big boom in the 1980s, this rise of neoliberalism and leaders like Ronald Reagan fueled with widespread narratives that government is the problem, not the solution. Public sector workers during this time were painted as overpaid bureaucrats bogging down innovation, while the private sector jobs were glorified as bold, dynamic, and merit-based. I don't think this message was just political. It's a psychological conditioning. Over time, it shaped how we frame ambition, success, and even self-worth. Synonymous with mediocrity, while chasing high-risk, high-reward roles became a badge of pride, even if it came with burnout and instability. I also know a lot of people who work incredibly hard and long hours at their private company, whether they're working 60 hours or 70 hours at a law firm or working as an exec at some company. There are people out there who are working really hard. And I think that's great if you want to live that life. But I see a lot of people where it feels like they treat it like it's their only choice. So I want to bring some statistics and data into this. I recently spent some time reading the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a survey on employer costs for employee compensation. And this was done in March of 2024. It paints a strikingly different picture of how we might typically view public sector jobs. It reveals significant advantages in public sector employment. On average, state and local government jobs pay around $61 per hour in total compensation, compared to just $43 an hour in private sector. The major difference? Benefits. Public sector benefits like pensions and healthcare account for about 38% of total compensation, compared to just 30% in private industry jobs. That means more of your work is actually going towards your long-term well-being. So why don't we naturally gravitate towards these clearly advantageous public sector roles? I think psychology plays a role. For example, optimism bias, our tendency to believe that we'll be the exception. You might think, sure, most people struggle in the private sector, but I'm going to be the one who makes six figures right out the gate. That belief can cause us to chase unstable paths in hopes of hitting it big. I know a lot of people who might make a lot of money for a few years in a private company, but then it gets washed out or something happens. I have a friend who worked for an electric car company that recently dissolved and went under. His reason for going to that job was because it paid really well, but then while he was searching for a new job, he was making no money. If you take the average of the money he was making versus the time where he was making zero money and dipping into savings, you start to see that go down. That's part of the instability of working for private companies that can go under in very short periods of time. I think an important element is the scarcity principle. Private sector roles often get packaged as exclusive, fast-moving, elite. You're going to wear a lot of hats. Think about how prestigious it sounds to say you work for a Fortune 500 company, even if the hours are brutal. That sense of exclusivity can override your deeper needs for balance or meaning and purpose. I also think there's a huge element of hyperbolic discounting. We have a preference for immediate rewards over long-term gains, which draws us to flashy signing bonuses, quick promotions, or compact perks. A private sector job might offer a $5,000 bonus now, which feels exciting, over the promise of a pension for 30 years from now, even if the pension is worth it long term. I think social comparison plays a role. Your peers and family admire private sector success and see public jobs as fallbacks. It's easy to feel pressured to conform. You might think, oh, if I take the city job, will people think I gave up? By the way, while we're talking about this, let's not overlook something equally important: the value of bringing with you from your current job or your past job. I want to dig a little bit deeper and talk about what you might do if you're in a bad job and you want to transition to something better. You've built skills in customer service, sales, conflict resolution, and multitasking. These transfer well into roles like sales rep, office admin, customer success, and even banking. If you worked in food service, you've likely mastered teamwork, stress management, and rapid problem solving. These translate beautifully into hospitality, events, healthcare coordination, or front desk roles. If you work for a call center, that gives you incredible communication skills, emotional regulation, and software familiarity. These are skills that would be great in HR, tech support, or being a 911 dispatcher. Or let's say you work at a warehouse or something that's labor intensive. You've learned discipline, time management, safety awareness, logistics, from delivery to inventory control. Let me pause this. Or let's say you work at a warehouse or some sort of labor intensive job. That's taught you discipline, time management, safety awareness, and logistics. These skills can translate into roles like delivery driver, logistics coordinator, forklift operator, warehouse supervisor, safety inspector, or even entry level project manager roles in construction. What I'm trying to say is just because a job was low paying or stressful, it doesn't mean the skills you gained were low value. Reframing your experience can open doors that you didn't even think were possible. And also understanding these biases that we have can help us make more informed career decisions. We have to recognize there are a ton of psychological traps that keep us in bad jobs or steer us away from stability and keep us from having a fulfilling job. So, the choice between a public and a private sector job isn't really just economical. I think it's also psychological. Our awareness of these mental biases and historical influences is the first step we can take to make better career decisions and ultimately achieve greater personal and financial well-being. I want to talk about that. I also just want to talk about some of the things that bad jobs will do to cause you to end up staying there longer than you probably should. One of the biggest things is going to be an unpredictable schedule. Many retail and food service companies just-in-time scheduling, posting work hours at the last minute or frequently changing shifts. Employees may not know next week's schedule until a day or two prior, and shifts can fluctuate wildly. This chaos makes it nearly impossible to arrange job interviews, classes, or a second job to improve your situation. So I found this report from over 10 years ago, but it talks about these scheduling issues. It's titled Unpredictable, Unsustainable, the Impact of Employers' Scheduling Practices in DC. And while it is just DC, I think this applies to many places throughout the United States. In the report, it says that erratic scheduling contributes to a vicious cycle in which employees are trapped in low-wage jobs. Workers can't gain new skills or search for new work if they're constantly on call. A survey in Washington, D.C. found that 12% of hourly workers said their work schedules prevented them from attending school or training, which locked them out of advancement. In practice, an abusive schedule isolates workers. They're always waiting for the next shift, unable to make commitments that could lead them out. The other type of exploitation and abuse is simply being overworked in this practice of assigning back-to-back closing, then opening. One other phenomenon that is used to abuse workers is called clopening. It's related to the practice of assigning back-to-back closing, then opening shifts. Clopening, or chronically understaffing so that employees must regularly stay late. Workers end up exhausted with little free time to job hunt. Some managers deliberately overload reliable employees to the point that they can't imagine taking on a new job. When you're drained each day, updating a resume or networking falls by the wayside. The bad job consumes all energy, trapping you in a cycle of work, sleep. Another thing that bad jobs will do is fear-based management. Toxic managers often rule by fear to keep workers in line. They may overtly threaten job loss. You have a job. If you don't like it, there's the door. For example, this was in the DC report. They talked about how one of the managers was having an issue with staffing and scheduling, and he handed out resignation letters for anyone who had a problem, implying they'd be fired if they complained. This my way or the highway stance creates a climate of fear. Employees become afraid to speak up or push back on mistreatment, let alone take steps to leave. Public shaming, constant threats of write-ups, and other fear tactics create anxiety and submission. In a fear-based workplace, people are terrified to make a wrong move. They'll work late rather than risk their boss's wrath. And they won't take time off to interview elsewhere because they're petrified of being caught. Such management stifles risk-taking, including the risk of finding a better job. Even though it's from 10 years ago, I think a lot of what it talks about still is pertinent today. I also just want to take a little bit more time talking about some of the benefits of the public sector, because I don't think people spend enough time thinking about the overall advantages, especially long-term. One is job security. Government jobs are notoriously stable. Layoffs are rare, and hiring and firing is often governed by civil service rules. Public employees historically have greater job security than private, and that's a trend that's continued even through recessions, which is something we might be facing soon. Being a state or local government worker reduces the probability of job loss by about 2 percentage points compared to similar private worker jobs. Many public sector roles require just cause and due process to terminate, rather than at-will firing. This means that once you're in the job, it's hard to get rid of you. Another thing I want to emphasize are benefits like healthcare and retirement. Benefits are a hallmark of public jobs. Government workers almost always have access to health insurance and retirement plans. For example, 99% of full-time state and local government workers have access to an employer retirement plan. And many of these are traditional pensions, which guarantee income in retirement. Health coverage is also nearly universal for full-timers. Governments often subsidize a large portion of premiums and offer generous plans, more common in the public sector as well. Let's compare that to the private sector. Benefits in the private sector range from excellent to none, depending on the employer. Large corporations often offer good health insurance and 401k retirement plans, but small businesses offer minimal benefits. Overall, about 87% of full-time private workers have health insurance from their job, and 70% have some retirement plan access, primarily 401k plans. Private sector health plans might require higher employee premium shares than public plans. In general, benefits constitute a large share of total compensation in government than in private. While some private employers match or exceed public health benefits, many don't. Some private jobs, whether part-time or a gig, have no benefits at all. I think another big comparison is salary and work compensation. Basically, if you work for the government, you're going to get a moderate, steady pay that's going to increase slightly over time. Whereas if you work for a private company, you might have big bonuses and make a lot of money, but it's hard to tell for how long or if that might change. In the public sector, there's a high floor, but a lower ceiling. There's no huge performance-based jumps or bonuses. But it's also uncommon to stagnate entirely. You're probably still going to make money over time and have that increase depending on if you're in a strong union or if your job is labeled where as you keep working, your pay is supposed to increase. I think also another huge part is going to be work-life balance. Working for the government means you will probably have a better work-life balance where you work 9 to 5 and you have federal holidays off. It's common for public employees to have steady day shifts with little after-hour expectations. Overtime for non-exempt roles is usually compensated and, in many unionized public jobs, strictly limited. Moreover, public agencies rarely expect staff to check email at night or work on weekends. As a result, many public sector workers report a predictable routine that allows for family and personal time. Surveys find that while private employees might get stuck late at work, government workers are all home when the office closes. Public employers also often have more generous leave policies, like longer parental leave, easier access to unpaid leave, or job protections in general. What I'm trying to get at is that bad jobs, they're tough, but they're not dead ends. And understanding why people stay in them can help people make empowered choices. Understanding the options that you have can help you make better choices. Recognizing the skills that you've earned in those work days, they have value. And whether you opt for stability in the public sector or the more highs and lows of the private sector, the point is that there are opportunities out there. I could talk about this for hours, and I have so many notes that I'm almost having trouble deciding if I want to put all of them in, which I shouldn't. I just want to leave with this. The choice between public and private isn't just economical. I think it's very much influenced by our psychology. It's being aware of these biases and also the historical influence. We can make better decisions and achieve greater personal and financial well-being. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. This is my first video. I hope you enjoyed. Please click the like button. Please subscribe. Leave a comment. I will be in the comments too. And thank you for watching.